there was always music in my house, and it was either jazz music. It was either AM radio that my mom used to leave on 24 hours a day because she thought it kept away the burglars, because I lived in a bad neighborhood. So it was either like, jazz, bossa nova, Broadway musicals, classical music. And then I had my older brother's record collection, which was nothing like the music that I was hearing in the house. I gravitated toward his record collection because of the album covers. I was only about 4 or 5 years old, and so the visual aspect of the album covers really attracted me to them, and I vividly remember those album covers because they're album covers that everyone knows today. Like, Are You Experienced? The first Jethro Tull album, the first Grateful Dead album, Quicksilver Messenger Service, even Black Sabbath Paranoid, and so that music was in my house, but I didn't hear it though because it was my brother's stuff, and he would just go on his own and listen to it, and I would catch snippets of it here and there, but I was mostly interested in the album covers. It was interesting because like one day I wandered into the living room where all the album covers were, and I saw this case on the floor. I looked at it, I was like, "What's this?" And of course, being curious, I walked over to it, opened up the latches, and opened it up, and it's a red SG, Gibson SG guitar. And I was like, wow, cool. And I remember taking it out and putting it on and plugging it into an amp and just hitting a note, bong, and it being a lot louder than I expected and being freaked out, thinking like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble. Someone's going to hear me. And taking it off, putting it back into the case, closing it, and putting it in the spot I found it in. And that was like my very first sort of experience with an electric guitar. And literally, I had to have been like 4 or 5 years old. So fast forward 10 years, I'm walking down the hallway, high school. I have my little tape recorder. I'm probably listening to like Jeff Beck Wired or Wheels of Fire, Cream, or like, I don't know, Electric Ladyland or something crazy like that. And I saw this commotion off to the side, these older kids, and I remember looking, and one of them pulled out a case of Strat. And when I saw the Strat, I was like, wow, it looks like a hot rod. And then it got me thinking, and I remember that day running back to the house and just thinking, wow, that guitar looked really cool. And then getting the album covers of the stuff I was listening to and looking at all the guitars that were on the covers of the albums, and particularly Kiss Alive, that picture of Ace Frehley holding his guitar. But I thought, is he holding his guitar inside out? And he was. If you look at that, he's actually holding his guitar inside out. And so the idea got into my head of trying to play guitar. And I remember trading a Kiss album. I had a Kiss album, and all the money I had, all the money I had in my life, which is $10, and trading it for this really cheap catalog guitar. Growing up, my family didn't have any money. I didn't have enough money to even buy a guitar case. I used to have to put a case into a garbage bag if I wanted to go anywhere. And so the very first time I got a wah pedal, it was because a relative of mine passed away, and I got a small inheritance of like maybe $150 or something, And I took that money, I bought a wah pedal, and it was amazing because all of a sudden I felt like I was able to make sounds that Jimi Hendrix was making, but also sounds that Brian Robertson, the guy from Thin Lizzy, was making. Pat Travers was making. Sounds that I was hearing on all these different albums, and I played that wah pedal literally for like months on end. It was just like always plugged in. I was always changing the battery, and it was just something I just loved. It was a great option when when I wanted to take my playing somewhere else, and I wanted a real distinct change of sound and direction and attack. stepping on that wall and just finding a spot on that wall all of a sudden shifted my thinking and my playing instantly. And that's what I like about wah pedal. It shifts my playing and it shifts my thinking almost instantly. And it brings more stuff out. People say that, using a wah pedal can be a crutch. And yeah, yeah, it can be. And I'm certainly guilty of that. I'll admit it, but only because I just love it so much. But the main reason I use it is because it inspires me, and then it's like instant inspiration. And it doesn't matter if my amp's up to 10 or my amp's up to 3, have a clean sound, dirty sound or whatever. The fact that I could step on that thing and all of a sudden I'm in a different tonal spectrum, it's great. It forces my brain to fill in that change. My first real guitar was a Strat, and when I plugged the Strat into the amp I had, I didn't get the fullness. I didn't get all the frequencies that I wanted to hear, and so I remember, because this was after the first Van Halen album, I remember getting a humbucker pickup. I think it's a DiMarzio Super 2 pickup, and putting it in the bridge position and not being quite quite satisfied with the sound. I remember that I had a plan. I was going to work for 6 months, get enough money to to trade in my Strat and an amount of money for a Gibson Flying V, because I really liked Michael Schenker. I really liked his sound. And I realized that Gibson was probably what I was hearing on all those albums. I decided that, I need to get a Gibson to get that sound. And so I remember showing up the music store, picking out a 1979 Gibson Flying V that was brand new, and doing the trade-in. And from that point on, I was in heaven. All of a sudden my sound was fuller sounding, and it made me realize that the sound that I was looking for was based around humbucking pickups and that sound. And even though I was just totally into Jimi Hendrix and that kind of sound, and later on Stevie Ray Vaughan, humbucking pickups were just my thing. It fit my style of playing. From there on, I've gotten this Gibson Flying V, and it was so great because it was the first time that I had a guitar that I was able to like really just master, from because Strats are there. You can do so much with a Strat, but I had so little experience with the guitar. I didn't fully know the Strat potential. But with a Gibson Flying V, it was all obvious to me. All the sounds were there that I wanted, the playability, the access, and the look. And for a kid, playing a Flying V guitar, it's like a big toy. And so I was just so happy. And then when I finally got a Marshall amp and plugged that Gibson into the Marshall amp, it was like it was complete. The sound that I was looking for was complete. And I remember the band that I was in at the time, the other guys in the band were seeing this transformation in sound. And then all of a sudden, the band I was in, we sounded different. We sounded more full, and it sounded closer to the sound that I was trying to get, which was this like a more aggressive hard rock sound that I wasn't hearing in a lot of American bands at all, but I was hearing a lot in European bands. And I wanted that sound, and I wanted to take that sound and just like, grab it and apply it to the music that I was playing with these other guys in the band that eventually was called Exodus. I realized that at some point, after listening to a lot of rock radio, that I liked loud, fast drums, distorted guitar, power chords, riffs. And, I just realized just recently that when I came to that decision, I was maybe 15 or 16 years old. I went to school and people were talking about these three guys I'd never heard of before: Pink Floyd, Jethro Tull, and Led Zeppelin. I was like, who are those guys? That's how naive I was. I remember just slowly getting into it. And then starting to listen to rock radio, and in the late 70s, rock radio really progressed and started getting just harder and harder until like around 1978, 1979. They were playing all sorts of hard rock, Aerosmith, Cheap Trick, AC/DC, Foreigner, Patrick, all that stuff was on the radio, and it was great. And I really could relate to what I was hearing, but it wasn't quite enough. It wasn't quite enough. It wasn't like fulfilling this feeling in my chest and in my gut. And then I heard UFO. It had to be like 1978 or 79, 1979, and all of a sudden I heard something that was what I was looking for, which was something heavier and a little bit more extreme, and just a little bit more aggressive than anything that was coming out of America. And when I discovered UFO, I also discovered a whole slew of other bands too that are coming out of Europe: Scorpions, Motorhead, and this thing called the new wave of British heavy metal. And I started buying all this stuff. Motorhead's first 2 or 3 albums, and then a whole barrage of other stuff came, like the first Maiden album and Diamond Head, Angel Witch, Tigers of Pantang, all this stuff. And it was what I wanted to hear. I also realized as I, would talk to my friends and like talk to people who were music fans at my school, no one was listening to this stuff. And when I played a lot of it for a lot of my friends, they didn't want to hear it. They did not want to hear it, or they're just like visibly irritated by it. So I started hanging out with the people who liked what I played for them. They're like, yeah, this is good, which ended up being, our gang of people, Exodus. And because we all liked this special type of music, we became a clique of friends. And I remember when it came time for Exodus, when we felt like we were ready to start playing clubs, we started going to a lot of the nightclubs in San Francisco and seeing these hard rock bands that are obviously influenced by Van Halen, Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, all the contemporary bands. And they're okay, but we also started seeing like 1 or 2 bands that were influenced by the same stuff we were. And me and all the guys next to this, we would gravitate toward those bands. There was only like 2 or 3 of them in the beginning, but it grew to be like 15, 16 bands, whatever. Basically, that's how the heavy metal scene in San Francisco started off. We were just a band of people who listened to the same sort of music, and we started to discover each other. And we discovered that there was this one guy named Ron Quintana who had a radio show on KUSF, college station in San Francisco, and his radio show was called Rampage Radio, and they played nothing but heavy metal, hard rock, and a new wave of British heavy metal, and that became our rallying point. Soon after that, a local club called the Old Waldorf decided to have Metal Mondays. So not only did we have a group of people who were like, who liked the same stuff, and not only did we have certain bands coming up, but we also had a radio station playing the stuff. And so that was the core of the scene. And everyone would talk to everyone else and say, hey, have you heard this band? Or have you heard this band? Or check out this demo of this band that's not even signed yet. We were hearing this music from Europe, and hardly anyone knew about it. And we were digesting it and spitting out our version of it, which became, the San Francisco thrash metal scene. Bands like Exodus and Metallica and all the other bands that came out of the Bay Area. But we were all pretty much doing the same thing. We're taking these obscure bands from England, listening to it and being so inspired by it, and turning out our own version of it, and our own version being just really, really super popular. That basically was how the scene started. It was Rampage Radio. It was Heavy Metal Mondays at the Old Waldorf. It was going to the import section of all these record stores, and it was us recognizing other people who listened to the same stuff. And the only way you could tell back then is if they had black leather jackets, because black leather jackets were not style back then. Black leather jackets and pins. And that's how you would know At the very beginning of that scene, there's maybe 50 people, but by the end of that scene, and maybe I don't know, whenever it stopped, maybe 90, 91, 92, it was practically the entire Bay Area. And that's how I believe, heavy metal, what we know as heavy metal today, really just like grew out of that scene in San Francisco and kind of spread all over the country. I remember we were just sitting out around one day, and the singer of Exodus, a guy named Paul Bailoff, was an absolute maniac. He walked into the rehearsal and said, "Metallica, so heavy. They're so heavy." And I was like, "Metallica." And I thought, what a great name. That's like the best name in the world. Metallica. That is the best name I think I've ever heard for a metal band. Metallica. He said, "Yeah, they're playing the Stone tonight. We gotta go check them out." And so we went down there, and literally there was like 15 people there. And I remember being at the front of the stage going, "Wow, these guys are pretty goddamn good." And there's a recording of that show. And in between songs, you can hear me scream, "Sweet Savage." And Dave Mustaine walks up to the mic and says, "Fuck off." But anyway, literally there was like 15 people at that show. A few months later, we got booked to play a Metal Monday, and it was Exodus's first show at Metal Monday at the old Waldorf. And we got booked onto that show because we were friends with the headlining band, which was a band called Law's Rocket. And the band in the middle was Metallica. And we were like, "Oh, this is cool. We're gonna be playing with Metallica. That's great." And I remember we played that show. There was about maybe about 100 people in the club, and then Metallica went on, and the place was packed. I don't know where the people came from, but all of a sudden they just showed up. Metallica played for like 45 minutes, and then when they went off stage, the place emptied, literally emptied, and there's like 30 people for Law's Rocket. And the next night was a benefit for Metal Mania magazine, and we got asked to play with Metallica again. And it was a better situation because it was just us and Metallica. And I met those guys for the first time in the dressing room of the Mabuhay Gardens, which wasn't much of a dressing room at all. It was like an indoor alley. That was just the beginning of my relationship with them. And it's really funny because uh, like years after that, people would ask me, "Well, when's the first time you ever talked to those guys?" And I would say, I first met him at the MAB, and Lars is like, "Really? I don't remember that." And James is like, "Huh? Really?" They don't even remember. Paul Bailoff was a very insightful sort of personality. He was really smart. All right. I'll say that first and foremost, he knew exactly what he was doing the whole time. And, it really was just like his way of like getting everyone together into the tribe and making sure that the tribe was pure and its intentions were pure and everyone was there for the right reasons. And his way of weeding out all the people who were not worthy was looking for visual signs like, "Oh, Motley Crue, they're posers. You must be a poser," or whatever. What he really was doing though is that he was just making sure that everyone was just as metal as they possibly could be in his presence. It was entertaining to watch because it was something that he saved exclusively for just the audience. He would never like walk up to any of the musicians and like pull that kind of shtick. Because I think he just knew that we probably knew better. But he would do it to the most like unsuspecting person in the audience, single them out and go, "Hey, you're a fucking poser," and dude, literally just like go over there and just like manhandle the person, tear off their shirt, rip it up, throw it in the audience, and keep a piece for himself and like wrap it around his wrist or whatever, take a trophy. And there was never a dull moment with him ever. Even like driving around with him, I'd get in his car. His dog, which is half wolf and half something else, would be in the back, barking, moving around, and Bailoff would be talking. He had road rage, so he would be like screaming at people outside of his window, talking to me, just driving just like haphazardly. It was just it was just very exciting being around him and an adventure. I was just sitting there, and it was April 1st, so I thought it was an April Fool's joke, and I had to say to the person on the other end, "Is this an April Fool's joke?" And they said, "No." They heard the Exodus demo, and they're very interested in you flying out and trying out for the band. I had a week to learn all the songs, and um, back then, learning 8 or 10 songs in a week would have been pretty difficult. I could probably learn 8 or 10 songs in like 4 days now because I'm just better at it. But back then, it was a lot. And I remember sitting down with that Metallica demo tape and just learning as much as I could, and then flying out. And I remember when I arrived to New York City, and I arrived to the rehearsal spot in Jamaica, Queens, at the music building, and literally it was like 20 degrees outside, and it was snowing, and that was a bit of a shock for me because I'd never left California at that point. I remember getting there, and it was like early evening, and those guys were just getting up. And I thought, who the fuck gets up at 6 or 7 o'clock at night? And I remember saying hello to them, and then like 15 minutes later, going, they were saying to me, "Come on, let's just play some tunes." And they said, "Well, what do you want to play?" And I instantly went for like the easiest song to play, which was "Seek and Destroy." And I remember playing "Seek and Destroy" with them, and I couldn't understand why Lars and James kept on looking at each other and smiling. And I thought, wow, they must really enjoy this song, or maybe there's something else going on that I don't know about. But I later found out that it was because that they were just so happy that it sounded so good right from the start. I just started playing shows with them. And then next thing you know, I'm in the studio with them and recording Kill 'Em All. And so I thought, well, I must be in the band if I'm recording an album with them now. Because they never sat me down and said, "You're officially in the band." They never did that. We only had 3 weeks, and we had to rush through a lot of stuff. And there's all sorts of mistakes on that album, but we couldn't really do anything about it. Everything was pretty much uh, um, scheduled. This time for drums, drums and bass. This time for rhythm guitars. This time for lead guitars. This time for vocals, and wherever you were at the end of that period of time, that's where you were at. And so a lot of those guitar solos I wish I could do over, but it's like it was really just, okay, done, next one. Okay, done, next one. Okay, done, next one. But what? I gotta fix some stuff. Nope, we gotta go to the next one. I mean, there's like the bad notes all over that album. Bends are kind of shaky. But when I think about it, it's just like it gives the album personality, and I heard a track. I think I heard Four Horsemen a couple days ago, and I thought, we were just going for it. We were just happy to be there, and we were happy to be recorded. We had pretty high standards of quality even back then, but we didn't have the resources to really do anything about it until the next album. And then that's why there's such a big difference in terms of like sound and production between Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. Ride the Lightning represents everything that we wanted to do on Kill 'Em All but couldn't because of time restraints. And so that's why when you put them together, there's a big difference, a lot of progress in terms of sound and performance. But it was fun. We got drunk every night afterwards, kind of like just celebrating. And we didn't really know what the engineer was supposed to do. We had no idea what the producer was supposed to do. And so we were just kind of like, taking it all in and taking notes. And, I would say that Kill 'Em All is imperfect, but that's what makes it perfect. This is imperfections. We were touring in less than favorable conditions, but it didn't matter because it was our first tour. And, just the fact that we were on tour and being able to like go from place to place, from city to city, and play different people every night was enough to keep us going. I remember having a lot of problems with my guitar sound. constantly having problems with my guitar sound. Uh, because the Marshalls we had, I don't know what it was, but it seemed like every time I plugged into the Marshall I had back then, it just sounded different. And we couldn't. It was really hard for us to have consistent guitar sounds. Or James and I were always just like messing with our sounds on that first tour, and it didn't help that we didn't have cases for any of the amps. That stuff was just thrown in the back of a U-Haul. Um, and so we were constantly having problems, but it was all a learning experience as well. There were two bands stuck into a very small RV, us and Raven, and our crews. And so there was about, I would say, about 12 people in an RV. We had a blast on that first tour because we were doing we had would been the goal, ever since we picked up our instruments, go on tour, make an album, go on tour, and play music for people who'd never experienced us live before. And I remember when Kill 'Em All came out, and I thought, it'd be so wonderful if it was successful enough for us to do a club tour from coast to coast. I thought, if we can do that, then that's some real success. And I thought that that would be pretty much the extent of it. We'd just be a club band playing clubs because that's how we all started. And that's where that genre of music was sitting. It wasn't that popular. All you could do is play shows that were club shows because not a lot of people, there just wasn't an audience yet for this kind of music. It was limited. It was a lot of fun. And I remember, just I had to bring my guitar everywhere with me, and I always had to have it within like 2 or 3 feet of me because I was paranoid of it being stolen. And on that, right after that, the Kill 'Em All tour, we had an equipment truck stolen with like all our amps, all our cabinets, and a few guitars. But none of the guitars were like, our serious guitars. They're all backup guitars. And I was just so thankful that I taking the time to always have my guitar and my guitar case close to me, whatever the situation. And actually, I'm still like that to this day with that guitar. I mean, wherever I sleep, that guitar is probably in the same room with me. And so, Ride the Lightning, it was a very interesting album. We landed in Copenhagen, and we were there to record an album. And we had a limited budget, and we had worked out only so much time. And when it looked like we needed to be there longer, we worked out a deal with the studio, but we didn't have any place to live. And so we actually ended up living upstairs in like the storage room where they kept all the tapes. So there'd be a space on the floor, and literally fucking 3 sleeping bags, and then shelves of master tapes. I say it's 3 sleeping bags because Lars, him being from Copenhagen, always had a place to crash. But Cliff, James, and I, we were sleeping on the floor. But the thing with Ride the Lightning is we were just kind of like, we knew we had more time to explore certain guitar sounds, and we knew that having the right drum sound was key to having a good sounding album. I mean, all great sounding albums sound with great drum sounds, and we knew that. And we knew Sweet Silence had a reputation for just it being a great sounding studio. Also, back then, studios were a lot cheaper to record in compared to American studios. And it was Copenhagen, Lars' home country, blah blah blah. We just thought it was a good thing to be away from the Bay Area. Uh, but what we did not know is that we were going to be away for so long, and we ended up being away for like 5 or 6 months, and we all got incredibly homesick. I mean, incredibly homesick. I remember a lot of those feelings that are around the lyrics of "Fade to Black" had a lot to do with just feeling homesick, because we were all just pining for home. I remember, being kind of, depressed, wanting to be home. Came time to do my solos. And I remember just like, fuck, I have all this energy, but I'm like bummed out at the same time. And so I just kind of put all those feelings into my guitar solos, and that was therapy. Cliff, he was the only one who actually like studied musical theory in earnest. I mean, I studied music theory, but Cliff went to school and studied it for like a couple years. And so he had a much firmer grasp of musical theory and harmonies. He was really, really good at teaching us how to harmonize guitars and whatnot. I mean, my only experience with harmony guitars is like Thin Lizzy songs, and even then, I'd only play one guitar part. But Cliff, who's really into harmonizing everything. And he would like come up with bass parts and harmonize the bass parts. He played a lot of guitar. He'd come up with guitar parts and harmonize guitar parts. He was just really, really into harmony.
So who's your main influences there, Cliff?
Main influences, Geezer Butler, Geddy Lee, Stanley Clark, Tony Iommi, Richie Blackmore.
You don't like Kingpin?
Ed King, old guitar player for Leonard Skinner. He's fucking bad as shit.
What? Oh.
I just swore a few times. I guess I wasn't supposed to do that. No.
And so I remember I was working out guitar solos for Ride the Lightning. I thought, I'm going to harmonize this piece in this solo. And I remember thinking, okay, if I do it myself, it's going to take hours. But if I get Cliff over here, it's going to take 15 minutes. And, he's just like, he said, all right, write out all the notes. And I was like, okay, E, G sharp, B, and he'd go, okay, E, we're going to go to the fourth, which is A. Okay, G, we're going to go to the fifth, which is C. He'd do that kind of thing and just do it all on paper. And then he'd say, okay, then let's get our guitars and see how it sounds, And 9 times out of 10, it would sound correct. And I would be so blown away. And so there was a point during Ride the Lightning that Cliff left to go back home, and we're all so jealous because his parents sent him a ticket, and none of us had that kind of resource, to do that. And so there was a time during the Ride the Lightning sessions where it was just James, Lars, and myself. And I remember James wanted to work out. It's not really a harmony. It's like a alternate part in For Whom the Bell Tolls. And it's kind of based on harmonies. And I remember him and I trying to work it out, and we fucking couldn't work it out. And him just like being frustrated and going, fuck, I wish Cliff was here. But it took a few days, but eventually he worked it out. It just goes to show, I mean, he had such a great grasp on music theory, and his approach to harmonies and everything, harmonic, rubbed off on us a lot. And then once he left, I remember thinking, oh shoots, we've lost like a huge source of musical knowledge, and technique and theory. And I remember thinking, shoots, who's gonna fill that gap? And I remember just freaking out and then buying a bunch of music books and just brushing up on my own musical knowledge and theory. And so, I mean, that was pretty much his biggest sort of contribution in terms of inspiring us and influencing us, other than his raw riffs. Back then, we had so much energy, and a lot of it was just nervous energy. I remember whenever we would play a big festival like that, we'd all be a bit nervous, and some of us would, have a couple beers, to kind of take the edge off. But that nervous energy, I think, contributed a lot to the beats per minute.
If you came here to see spandex and fucking eye makeup and all that shit, and the words rock and roll baby in every fucking song, this ain't the fucking band. We came here to bash some fucking heads for 50 minutes. Are you fucking with us? I you was born to serve to the pharaoh. Hate with every word. Living fear. Right of the unknown one. The deliverer. Wait, something must be done. 20 years.
The fact of the matter is that back then we were just all so just energetic naturally. We all just had so much energy, and we just needed a place to like get it all out. And the music was where it all came out. I remember when we were getting the song Master Puppets together, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it's just everything just kind of flowed into every riff, flowed into every other riff. And, the only thing that was 100% realized with that song was the opening riff, the main riff. Everything kind of like just came after it. Like the verse parts I had, this is based off some riffs I had, but they weren't exact. They didn't sound like that. And the pre-chorus part, before the chorus, is another thing that I had, but it didn't sound quite like that. The chorus was something that James had, but it didn't quite sound like that.
Master of puppets, I'm pulling your strings, twisting your mind and smashing your dreams. Blinded by me, you can't see a thing. Just call the name, 'cause I'll hear you scream. Oh, Master.
So it was when everything came together, that riff kind of like set the tone for all these riffs to be changed to become that song. And so we didn't know that the finished product was going to sound like that for that particular song. All we had was a riff. By the time that song was done, we were like, wow, this is fantastic, much better than any of us thought. And that was really consistent from song to song. I mean, Disposable Heroes, I remember showing up, we were jamming on it. The very fast part was a riff I had that we had been jamming on for like months before. At least Lars and I, we would jam on the fast part, just casually. But when that song was coming along, the feeling that it was special started to hit me. And I remember I got a lump in my throat. And that lump started showing up on a regular basis every time I'd show up at rehearsal and it came time to play another song. I'd get this lump in my throat. I was like, wow, I'm physically reacting to this song on a subconscious level. That's what that tells me, because I'm just working on, the logistics of the song, but something inside of me is being affected too from an emotional sort of a standpoint. Same thing happened when we were working on Sanitarium. I was just like, lump in my throat again. Orion was the middle part of Sanitarium until it was decided that it was going to be its own thing. And so then Orion became its own thing, and Sanitarium became its own thing. At one point, we were debating whether Sanitarium needed a chorus or lyrics over the chorus part or not. Of course, lyrics came over that chorus. Most of the material was written. There was only a couple songs that were not done by the time we got to Sweet Silence. That was the thing that should not be. But the basic riffs were there. It just needed to be finished, and also Damage Incorporated. Again, the basic riffs were there, just needed to be finished. And those were just finished just really quickly in the studio. Those two songs were when they were done, they were done. There weren't any like major changes or anything like that to it. And I can remember thinking with the thing that should not be, it was in 1986, hardly anyone tuned down, but we wanted to tune down because of Sabbath, Into the Void, that kind of thing. Not only did we tune down, but we tuned down a half step more than usual, which was, everyone back then, or Sabbath, will only tune down to D. We tuned down to C sharp, thinking that, we're that much more clever. It's going to be that much more heavy. It turned out heavy. Much more heavy, I don't know, but it turned out pretty heavy. For me, that's one of the standout tracks. The thing that should not be. I think it's a really, really unusual type of song. And at the time, there wasn't very many songs like that. In fact, you can look at all the songs on Master of Puppets and say there aren't any songs like this contemporarily right now. And I think that's why it became such a successful album, is that we presented a palette of colors that no one had ever seen before, or tasted before. And to this day, if you're not hip to like heavy metal culture or the sound of heavy metal, and you get that album, it's like a blueprint for so many albums to come afterward. But it's such a unique album, and everything that we knew at that point, all our skills, all our knowledge, all our creativity, all our inspirations, all our influence were poured into that album. It was great. It was really intimidating for me because I held Black Sabbath at such high fucking standards. It's just like to me, at that point, Black Sabbath were the ultimate, and even to this day, I still feel that. And to be touring with the lead singer of, the former lead singer of Black Sabbath was just a huge thing. And, being a huge Randy Rhoads fan and Blizzard Boss fan too, that definitely played into it. But, for Cliff, it really, really meant, I think, more to him than anyone else. And all he could talk about the entire time was Black Sabbath. And, during sound check, he was always playing Sabbath riffs in the hopes that he'd get Ozzy's attention, And I remember one time, what were we playing? Maybe Hole in the Sky or maybe Symptoms of the Universe or something during sound check. And all of a sudden, all out in front of the stage, there's Ozzy, like big old smiles going, yeah. And oh my God, we just like, it was amazing for us to like be acknowledged by Ozzy during that sound check. And I remember looking over at Cliff, and Cliff just had the biggest smile. It's just like, and whenever he was happy, he'd do the slow motion walk, he'd just like do the slow motion walk. But whenever he could, he'd always mention Black Sabbath to Ozzy, and he would always try to get Ozzy to talk about Sabbath. And Ozzy was always like, happy to talk about Sabbath. And so Cliff and Ozzy, they had quite a few conversations. There's one time where our bus stopped at a truck stop, and Ozzy's bus stopped at a truck stop. And we were told by Sharon the entire time, can't drink around Ozzy. Can't drink, If you're going to drink, pour it in a solo cup. But don't give him any booze. Don't be seen drinking around him. Just like none of that. And we're like, fine, Sharon. And we were really good solo cups, we were really like paying attention to that. So we stopped, both buses stop at a truck stop, and everyone on our bus gets off except for Cliff. Everyone on Ozzy's bus gets off except for Ozzy. Ozzy gets off his bus and walks over to our bus and goes onto our bus and sees Cliff. And the first thing he says to Cliff is, "Got any beer?" And Cliff's like, "Yeah, Oz, right there. Help yourself." And so after about 20 minutes, all of us go on, and there's Ozzy on our bus, and he's drinking. And I'm like, holy shit, what are we gonna do? We did not know what to do. We were like whispering, going, he's drinking. What are we gonna do? And we had no idea what we were gonna do. I remember at one point, our tour manager went off the bus, went onto Ozzy's bus, grabbed their tour manager, and said, we're in a real situation here. Got to get Ozzy off our bus. And so after about 10 minutes, their tour manager came on and said, Oz, we're about to leave. And Oz was like, oh, but I want to ride with them. And the tour manager's going, Ozzy, we need to ride. We need to be together. And Ozzy left. And it was a bit of a situation because we thought that, the whole thing that just went down might have gotten us kicked off the tour. And, there are actually a couple situations where we thought we were going to get kicked off the tour, but we weren't. It was our first arena tour. So, and this was like, a conversation that we would have nightly and go out there and fucking play our asses off as heavy and as hard and as energetic as we could, and just headbang as hard as you can, and just like go out there and give it 1,000%, because it's our first arena tour. We wanted to make a maximum impact. So that was the attitude every single fucking night. And, in retrospect, I think we pulled it off, because I remember seeing an interview with Ozzy, like 2 or 3 years later, and he said, yeah, when Metallica were on tour, they blew us off every night. I was just going, geez, I'm seeing this in the magazine going, yeesh, that's, that's quite a lot for someone like Ozzy to say, because, my experience is we went out, we played as much as we could, and then we'd get off stage and we'd watch Ozzy's show, and Ozzy every night looked like he went down, like he was just like, master of the universe. And for him to think that we blew him off stage after watching him go down every night, it really made an impression on me, because I could tell that, he was judging us not on fucking, audience standards, but on musical standards, and like, real, like creative standards. And, it really meant a lot to me.
WRTN Inertia, the home of Midnight Metal. Of course, tonight dedicating the entire show to Cliff Burton of Metallica, who died early this Saturday morning in a tragic auto accident. The tour bus of Metallica going off the road during their tour in Sweden. It was early this Saturday morning that it happened. Metallica's minivan, or tour bus, whatever you want to call it, was on way to Copenhagen from a gig in Sweden. And as we have learned, the driver of the bus fell asleep and causing the van or tour bus to go off the road. James, Kirk, and Lars had abrasions. As of now, Anthrax and Metallica are in Copenhagen, Denmark, in a hotel together, and we're going to bring you the latest on this tragic incident.
The last show that we played with Cliff was a spectacular show, because it was the first show after maybe 6 or 7 weeks that James was finally back on guitar, because he had broken his arm during the Ozzy tour, and his arm had healed enough so that he was actually able to play guitar. And it was the first show where we had James back, and it was the night that Cliff died. So everyone, Cliff, James, Lars, and myself, we were just so happy that James is back, and to have James's guitar, fucking fueling everything again, rather than me and John Marshall sharing that duty. We played really, really well and felt that, we were back 100%. Everyone was so inspired, and we played that show so well, because we had not played like that in 4 to 6 weeks or whatever. So yeah, that last show was like one of the best shows we had played all fucking year. And in retrospect, I'm glad that we, Cliff's last show was special in that regards. It really was, in all respects, one of the best shows we had played, and Cliff was very, very happy. And so, knowing that is just a good thing. Cliff and I, we used to room together, so we were super close. We were like brothers. So we'd hang out, fucking like hanging out, arms around each other. But literally like 10 minutes later, we could be arguing and fucking wrestling on the ground. That's the kind of relationship we had. Total 100% honest. Emotions just out there all the time. Cliff would say this so much. He would say, "There's power in the truth. There's power in the truth. There's power in the truth. You have to be honest all the time. You have problems with me. I want you to tell me, blah, blah, blah." And I would tell him, he would tell me, and then he'd like suggest ridiculous things like, "Okay, let's wrestle," or fisticuffs, or, the drinking contest, or "You got to show me this lick," or whatever. But, there was 2 weeks where it was just like a yo-yo. But Jan Burton, Cliff's mom, was there, and she was around us a lot, as was Ray Burton, and they kept on insisting that we go on, and we're like, yeah, but I mean, it really didn't really truly sink in until like maybe about, I don't know, 3 weeks or so, and we were just kind of like looking at each other going, well, what's going to happen now? We have to continue. Cliff would have wanted us to continue. And as a tribute to Cliff's memory, it was important for us to go on. And so those first 2 weeks, it was up and down. We had no idea what was going on. I mean, I was thinking, what am I going to do? I was thinking guitar lessons, the old standby for musicians who can't find, any gigs or a band, you give guitar lessons, the old standby. That's what I was actually thinking. But it was the insistence of Ray and Jan Burton that I think really just pushed us into the decision to keep on going. And then when Jason came into band, it was only like 4 or 5 weeks after the accident. I mean, we were still grieving, and we were all pretty young too. We were in our mid-20s. And we didn't really have, or at least I didn't have a lot of experience with grieving and knowing how to deal with that and knowing how to heal and how to move on. And so I hate to say it, but Jason became the scapegoat for all those feelings that we just did not know how to process. And to this day, I regret behaving like that and then taking that attitude. But I mean, we didn't really know better. And as far as the grieving period is concerned, I think we're all still kind of grieving, because I get emotional when I think about Cliff, and when we're together, think about Cliff. A lot. I know that James and I, we get really, really emotional, and so I mean, I would say for me, there's still some grief. After all these years, it's just like, after all these years, I can still feel that pain. In the late 80s, the music culture kind of steered itself towards, musical proficiency and how proficient you were with your instrument, and how virtuosic you can be, with your technique. And there was a lot of emphasis on that kind of thing, and there was a lot of like instrumental albums being put out by a lot of guitar players. They were super, super successful. And, The showy bit of being in a band was kind of like, I think, augmented by things like MTV and just being able to play your instrument. So I think that had a bit of an influence on us in terms of like wanting to show people what we could do, and how progressive we can be. Because after an album like Master of Puppets, we thought, wow, this is as technical as it gets, and at that point in our musicality, it was about as technical as we could get. But we wanted to show people that we can even go farther. And so conceptually, that was what we were thinking, in the songwriting. And, the riffs, they just, after touring on the Aussie tour and then playing all those headline shows, we had started really taking advantage of the fact that when you're on tour, your playing is really the level of ability is really high, playing at 100%, and all of a sudden all these riffs start coming out, and we were experiencing that pretty much for the first time, writing riffs on tour, because it's just what happens after a while. And so a lot of the riffs that ended up on Justice for All were riffs that were written on Master of Puppets. And, the technicality of what we were doing in Master of Puppets, wanting to take that further, influenced how those riffs were written. So when it came to a time to get all the music together for Injustice for All, we had a bevy of riffs that were just that much more thought out and developed and more progressive, because we had the ability to be more progressive. So we just took that and ran with it. We knew, because we had a relationship with MTV, we knew when they were planning on playing the video. They said, yeah, we'll play it twice an hour. So 6 o'clock, hour 6 o'clock, we're gonna play it twice an hour. Hour 8 o'clock, we're gonna play it twice an hour, blah blah blah. So we actually knew in advance when it was gonna come on. And I remember, okay, I can catch it, And I remember watching it, and then afterwards the VJ said, oh man, whew, that was depressing. Okay, now on to better things. And instantly I thought, we have something. If that was the reaction of the VJ, and there was no videos like that on MTV at that point, that was like the one video with dialogue, I thought, we're onto something. We are onto something here. I always knew the song was great, but you can think a song is great, but the audience will, for some reason or another, think otherwise. But I just knew from the reaction of that VJ that we had something that was actually hitting people on an emotional level. A lot of times, we go out there and, first song, Creeping Death, play it. And, habitually we go, come on, everyone, do this, sing. Well, that day, when we went out there and we're going, sing. The audience interpreted that as, these the bleachers flood the entire empty football field in front of the stage, and come to the front of the stage and just come closer to us. That's what it was interpreted as, but we were just going, sing. And so during that song, it was like a dam busted, and flowing out like water was just thousands of bodies out into the empty playing field, and right up to the stage there were rows of collapsible chairs that were just sitting there, and the audience just mauled them over, and and there are people picking up the chairs and throwing them forward, which is the only way you can get rid of them, which is towards the stage. So we're trying to play, and all these chairs are like flying, and they're hitting people up front, and they're landing in the security barrier and the space between, and it was like total chaos for like 10 to 15 minutes. And at one point, we had to stop playing because we were concerned that mass hysteria might break out and people might start getting hurt. So we sat there on stage, sat down, and people just kept on throwing stuff. And at this point, they were throwing anything to get their hands on. And then when it subsided, we're like, right, let's get back to playing. And we played again, and it was fine. But for 10 minutes, it really looked like the worst sort of mass hysteria and chaos you can ever think of. Thousands of bodies just flowing out, with no order whatsoever, and just filling space. It's a scary thing to see, but at the same time, it was incredibly awesome. And I never use that word, but it was. I hung out with George Lynch a lot. I hung out with George Lynch a lot. And, him and I would just play guitar, but I was mostly just watching him play. And, there was a few times where I would hang out with Eddie, but it was funny, we would talk, and I'd want him to like play guitar, but all he wanted to do was talk, and talk about equipment and guitars and stuff. And I always wanted to like actually play, but he always wanted to just talk, which was a little frustrating to me, for me. And like the Scorpions, they're always kind of like off to their own, and to like socialize with them, you'd have to like walk into their camp and like, hey, what's up? But I liked them so much that it was hard for me to stay away from them, and so I was always talking to Rudolph and Matthias, because those guys were like really the easiest guys to approach. And it was a pretty cool tour, I have to say, in terms of like guitar players and guitar playing. And I watched Eddie as much as I could, and to this day I still don't understand where he comes up with 90% of his licks, because they're like I don't hear any other people playing those licks. He just creates it all himself. He came down to rehearsals for the Black Album, and his one thing was, he said to us, "No one has ever caught the power and energy of you guys live on tape or on vinyl." And I thought about it, and I thought, he has a point. There is yet to be a recorded a song that captures the energy and the urgency that comes with seeing us live. And that was his goal. And to a certain extent, looking back at the albums that he did do, I mean, he caught a lot of energy in the studio. I mean, his whole way of recording us was so radically different than anything we'd ever done. And all of us playing together in the same room to record the drums was a milestone for us, because in the past it was just James. And we honestly thought that whenever we were all playing together like that in the room, that Lars always played better. And that using that recording technique proved that was the case. And so the first time I heard it on the radio, I was blown away about how good it sounded, because one sounded pretty good on the radio. It sounded pretty good on MTV, even though it's compressed to shit. But there's something about the Black Album and all the tracks that just made it leap out of the radio. Maybe it's because there's so much presence in the drums, the drums are so crisp. I don't know, but every track that's played on the radio, it just like leaps out of the radio. There's so much presence, and to me, I mean, that's the thing that I keep on going back to, is just how good it sounds when I hear it on the radio. And it never struck me as being a hit song, None of those songs ever struck me as being hit songs. They struck me as being just like really, really good, concise songs with great periods of heaviness and great periods of melody. And when the album just started, selling the way it did, I could not believe it. And I even had a bet. I had a bet with our tour manager. He said, "Yeah, 6 million. It's going to sell 6 million by this date." I was like, "I'll give you my Porsche 911 Carrera if that happens." And guess what? It happened. And guess what? I had to give him my Porsche 911 Carrera. For me, I think Bob, he's an amazing producer, and he's also an amazing engineer, and he has an amazing ear for guitar sounds, for drum sounds. Some of the best guitar sounds that I have ever gotten in my life, I've gotten with Bob Rock. And a lot of it is just like, chasing tones, blending amps, using certain amps with certain pickups, certain guitars with certain amps, the various combinations, blending amps, blending guitars. What I like about Bob Rock is that he is into the pursuit. If he hears something, a sound or performance, he will pursue that or make you pursue it until he believes you've reached that point. And a lot of times it's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of footage that shows him being just like so frustrated, going, "It's not there yet. It's not there yet. Do it. Push, do it." And he would do anything, say anything to just push us to that next level.
It's like he's got to fucking eat, sleep, and breathe this fucking solo until it's done. Like fucking James put time into nothing. Songs like these deserve that. It doesn't need fucking flash.
It's not his style.
He's got to put some time into this one.
He's not going to work on it.
Oh, so just let's slap on anything. That's what you're saying.
No!
So what do you suggest? It's like crackle boom, da-da-doo-doo, da-da-doo-doo. It's fucking.
Let him do his thing. I guess what I'm just trying to say, he starts up there and then goes down, and all the shit you said right there is great shit, but I don't see it being any less great if it comes in bar 2 instead of in bar 1.
What I'm saying is build rather than blow your load, bring everybody down, and then build it up again. I'm just saying let's fucking get guttural and build it to a peak, because that's why there's the strings and all those changes at the end.
Why can't it start here and go like that?
Yeah, that's my school of thought. Grab them and like take them to this other place and then really take them to a higher plateau. Fuck man, sound new age.
Go ahead.
You got his
Go ahead.
permission to try.
Impress me.
You got his permission.
Do whatever you want, Kirk. And
I have to.
you agree with him? Go for it, man.
Well, come on, let's cut the shit and start working.
Cut to the chase and fucking play, okay?
All right, man.
Now that you've warmed up.
I liked that approach, and it was really effective at the time, because at that point I didn't feel like I knew my full potential, and Bob Rock really helped me just like kind of see my own potential over the course of all the albums that we recorded with him. Bob's really, really good at just steering the entire project along and keeping everything in place so nothing like veers too much this way or veers off too much that way. He keeps everyone very, very focused and all the goals in sight. And I think he's just a great I It was a 3-year tour, and we started in 1991 and ended in I think the summer of '94. That tour is very special because when you put out a tour and put out an album, you're guaranteed you can go to A markets, which is like all the usual big cities: Chicago, San Francisco, L.A., New York. Those are A markets. The B markets are like Oakland, Pasadena, New Jersey, that kind of thing. But if your album is really good, then you can hit up the C markets, And because the album's selling and it's a good barometer of who's buying these records, you know, you can go into C markets and know that you'll sell tickets because, you know, the album is doing so well just everywhere. You know, there's kind of like a built-in audience. So we were going to places like, you know, Butte, Montana, Valdo Lakes, fucking in Minnesota, places I'd never even heard of. And we're showing up, and the shows were selling out. The Expanse of the Black Album was amazing. The Expanse and the reach of it over the course of the tour was amazing because we were able to get into the nooks and crannies of America and play to places that normally, you know, bands would not go because they had not sold records in those areas, but we had at that point. And so, you know, it was really important for us. And now, and to these days, those markets are still very strong Metallica markets. And it's because we went there during the Black Album. Well, the pressure is for me to, like, you know, to not do the same thing twice, you know. And so every album I try to not repeat myself. And, you know, I know you guitar players know what I'm talking about. We all have our bag of tricks, you know. once we've been through those bag of tricks, we're just kind of like staring at the floor, going, "Oh, now what do I do?" And I wanted to like be free of that sort of thing. And my way out of that is to just fully and completely improvise and just completely work on my improvisation. And you know, I realized this in the '90s, so I started listening to a lot more blues and a lot more jazz and just a lot more improvisational music in general. And you know, my whole attitude now is if I improvise and just make up stuff right on the spot, that's a real honest way for me to just like really show what I'm feeling and what my guitar capabilities are in the moment. I never know what the heck my guitar solos are going to be on certain songs live because I leave it open. You know, Fade to Black solo. I know that the first 7 or 8 bars are going to be what I always play, but I don't have any idea what I'm going to play after that. And there's a lot of songs in Metallica's set that are now like that never used to be. My point is that, you know, being recognized and getting so much attention from so many other guitar players all over the world. Yeah, I feel the pressure of that, you know, and I feel the expectations of that, but I'm not gonna let it affect the outcome of my own musicality. I started playing guitar because I have a curiosity, real curiosity for music and how music works. And I also have, you know, emotions and feelings in me that even to this day that need to get out, you know. What's important is to make music that reflects your inner self and is honestly not anything that's been done before. And it's difficult, but you know, it's a challenge that I like because I can wake up every day to that challenge. You know, it gets me out of bed and it gets me to walking over to my instrument and going, what can I squeeze out of this thing now that's different, that no one else has heard ever before? Looking back now, I've played guitar for over 40 years now. I should be way better. But looking back, the most important thing is practice. And the most important thing is also 100% commitment. You really have to play as much as you can, and you really have to be really focused on what you want to do. For me, it's like maybe after like 6 or 7 months of me playing guitar, I turned a point where I was like, I need this in my life. You know, this is so important for me. I don't think that there's anything else that's more important, you know, other than the other things like, you know, family, friends, health, whatever. I don't think there's anything else that's this important to me in my life. And I held on to it like a fucking lifeline. The greatest thing that happened to me is like I played guitar literally 12 hours a day when I was a kid. And I reached a point where I was just like, I know that I can do something. I know I can make some sort of living out of it, whether it's becoming a guitar teacher, being in a band, something. I know that, I can make music a part of my life. And I just stuck to it, and I kept my eyes and ears open for opportunities. And I also learned how to hustle to make work for myself ever since the very beginning, hey, I'm playing with you, and I'm playing with you, and we're going to form a band, we're going to play shows and make money. I've always had a real good sense of knowing how to sell the band, sell my music, and sell my musical abilities. If anyone tells you that you can be successful without being 1,000% committed and it being a lifestyle, they're lying to you. It has to be a lifestyle. If you want to become a guitar player, but you have other things in your life, that's great. But really, to really get where you want to be, it's a lifestyle. Look at all the other successful guitar players in the world. It's a lifestyle for them. I practice every fucking day. People still ask me, why do you practice? I'm like, are you kidding? About 10 years ago, something happened and something switched. And, I used to get so bored when I was doing tedious things with my guitar, like showing someone something or doing like tedious recording or rehearsal, whatever. But 10 years ago, something shifted and I enjoy everything now. I enjoy everything. None of it is work. None of it is work, except for one thing. There's one thing about my career that's work, and that's the change in my sleeping patterns. That is the one thing that just messes with me. Everything else I embrace wholeheartedly, 1,000%, whether it's rehearsal, the travel, the sitting down, working out harmonies, recording, taking 3 days to come up with a guitar sound, can't finish a song. Sometimes it takes 6 months to finish a song, it's all part of it, and I enjoy all of it. And, I constantly rejoice in the fact that I am staying true to playing guitar rather than working guitar. And for me, it's such a big difference. I always, I'm playing my guitar. I'm not working my guitar. I'm not struggling my guitar. I'm playing my guitar and I'm having a good time. And this is play. And it just also happens to be, my life commitment and how I make a living. And, I'd be doing this right now if I wasn't in Metallica. And I'd probably be, I don't know, like I said, a guitar teacher or something, But I would definitely have the same commitments because for me, it's just like guitar playing helps me so much. It saved my life. It calms down this thing that's inside of me. And it gives me focus and it gives me reason to get up out of bed. I hope this doesn't sound too far-fetched or whimsical, but classical music has survived 600-700 years, even longer, but they can't really document it. I really believe that heavy metal will probably outlast this century, and maybe outlast us. And I don't know what the world's going to be like in the future, but as long as there's a need for aggressive, energetic music that's somewhat therapeutic, I think that there will be musicologists in the future that are going to find our music and find some merit and quality in it, and that's huge.